The reason I think it was a great next job is that it wasn't the kind of experience you have in civil practice. It was, people were very supportive. Your colleagues in the office were very supportive. I mean, after all, it was a government job. It didn't really take the same kind of, I don't know, nastiness. You know, I will say, when I went into civil practice after I left there, I had never seen anything as uncivil as civil practice. Way worse.
Ditto
way
after
worse.
25 years of government law.
Yeah. And, you know, the U.S. attorneys were really collegial, and it was actually a very nurturing environment, so that I was much more prepared by the time I went into the more cutthroat world that is civil practice to deal with it. I mean, I had, you know, learned a lot of stuff, and, you know, when you learn to try cases without any discovery, and then somebody goes in and says, oh my God, how can I do this without a deposition? I'm like, really? It really gave you a leg up in a certain way. You know, you weren't nearly as intimidated by the kinds of, you know, oh, I'm going to take this to trial. Okay, that's okay. And so it made that transition so much easier for me. So for people like me, I highly recommend that path.
Well, as you've heard, everyone on this panel, except me, no, everyone on the panel has all of these incredible professional accomplishments and such a variety of them. So my next question is, what do you consider your greatest professional achievement and the one that you think gives you the most satisfaction? So professional, because everyone otherwise would probably say their children. So, we'll start with you.
It's kind of unfair if you've been practicing for 52 years, but it's a conglomerate answer, and it is the thing I'm proudest of. And I don't know if it's a combination of skill, some, kind of intuition, some, lot of luck. I have worked with, been able to hire and help develop some of the most extraordinary men and women in large firms that I could imagine, and particularly, mostly in the governmental area. I like to think, I was 19 years at Morgan Lewis, so I like to think I did well there in terms of that. But it was the office of the U.S. Attorney's Office, the State Attorney General's Office, particularly the second time around. I was there first 7 years and then another 8 years when I was chief assistant, and did an awful lot of interviewing, an awful lot of hiring, an awful lot of promoting, and occasionally even, obviously, in very large offices, saying to people that it wasn't working. But mostly, the people that I've worked with in those 50 years have been just absolutely extraordinary. And I can look around, even in this room, but any room I go to here in Los Angeles, and see people that were young lawyers with me when I was U.S. Attorney or Chief Assistant AG, that have just made such a difference to Los Angeles. I mean, whether they're now in the big firms and doing the same thing that I used to do and hiring people, or if they're on the court, and there are scores of them on the court, in Superior Court, the Court of Appeal, the Ninth Circuit, that started as young lawyers. So for me, that's definitely it. There's just no question.
Nina, how about you?
And I say this with some level of humility, but not a lot. I really changed the face of the entertainment bar in Los Angeles, certainly. I mean, I have a law firm now that has 20 lawyers, which is not large when you look at very large firms, but which is a good-sized firm for the boutique entertainment firm. And when I started and ultimately became a partner in a law firm, there were literally no other African-American partners in any of the boutique entertainment firms. There were virtually no lawyers. And when I say no, I mean maybe there were one or two others. And I really changed the face of that. First of all, I was so fortunate in many ways, but I was also very hardworking, and I had a significant number of accomplishments early in my career with artists and others who became household names. And I became a very, very competitive lawyer in the sense of ultimately every single entertainment firm ultimately hired a black lawyer, and they hired him because of me. They hired him because I was so competitive, and I was just taking clients left and right, and I was making people's lives really miserable because they had to explain why they didn't have any. So then when I started my own firm, I have, of the 20 lawyers, 10 are women. Of the 12 partners, a majority are men and women of color. I mean, I really made this bar totally different from the way it looked when I came to it. And I know that, there are so many young lawyers who, many of whom don't realize they have their jobs and they have their places in those law firms because of me. And I don't say that to brag. I mean, that is just quite simply the truth of it. There was no one there before me, and there was no one there until I was so competitive that they had to hire people who looked like me. And I have welcomed all of those people into the practice and been available to them, even though they are technically my competitors. And so I feel like in terms of the law, that is really my contribution to the bar that I belong to, that I have truly and absolutely left my mark. And I don't say this to be, because many of you won't know me, especially if you're in the government or the court system, but I am probably the best-known African-American entertainment lawyer in the transactional film and television world in the United States. And it was an incredible fight and an incredible amount of sacrifice, but that to me is my greatest accomplishment, not my own personal accomplishment, but the fact that I made a place for so many other people.
I just want to say hats off to Nina. Everything she says is completely true.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I did practice in the entertainment area. I was an entertainment litigator for a long time, and she is a legend. So, yeah. Makes me feel very small if I'm going to try to talk about what my professional accomplishments are. I'm not nearly as kind of outwardly focused in my answer as you guys are. For me, if I think back, I mean, I've had a lot of things that, I've done that I've been successful at, but I think what the overarching theme is for me, I was this little immigrant girl. I didn't know anything about anything. And somehow, I think I made my parents proud and really used my abilities, both intuitive and intellectual and whatever, and sort of my work ethic, to actually become like a recognized member of this legal community, which is a very prominent legal community. And for me to have accomplished that, I feel pretty good about that.
Absolutely.
And all of
And
you,
so do we, and so do we.
Absolutely.
all of you also have done a lot of community work.
Yes.
And giving back.
Yes.
And what would you say about that to younger lawyers? What's the reason? I mean, you've been interested in increasing educational opportunities, especially for girls. Gail's done all kinds of pro bono work and service to the court, and Andrea, you're sort of legendary for all your public service. What would you say about that and the importance of that in your development as a lawyer?
It's something that I could not have lived without, and I don't know. It's hard for me to understand people who don't feel that way, and I don't mean to be judgmental about it. But for me, it was something that was really very hardwired into my psyche. I mean, everyone in my family had given so much. My great-grandfather started the branch of the NAACP in Charlottesville, Virginia, and he never worked for a white man again. He could never get a job. He turned his car into a taxi, and then late in life, he did ultimately get a job as an orderly at the University of Virginia Hospital in Charlottesville. But when I think about the incredible sacrifices that he made to be a civil rights leader in his time, and his grandfather, who he just deified, was very much a part of the anti-lynching campaign of the late 1800s. And he was, among a number of black clergy who met with President Taft, and really, and he was a contemporary of and very close to Booker T. Washington. So I just had this family where, like, if you didn't do something, if you didn't give something, then, there was like something wrong with you. My grandparents they were small business owners also. They had like a little sundry store in Harlem. And they started the Harlem Black Business Persons Association. And I remember seeing like pictures of their meetings, and my grandmother would have her clubs, which were always involved in missionary work. And I mean, just my entire life was all about, what are you going to do? What are you going to give back? There was just not any point in my life where I think if I hadn't done this, there would be such great shame to have benefited from the sacrifice of all of those people and to have turned it into something that was just about me personally. I cannot imagine a life where without public service. It really is the only thing at the end of the day. It's really the real legacy, other than our children, that we leave. So.
Gail?
Well, they say that whenever you give, you get back more than you gave, and that has to be, that is so obviously true in every experience that people have. And I, like Nina, don't understand people who don't give back. I think at least for my generation, because I'm in between the two of you, I think I was sort of the 70s, and I went to Berkeley for law school. Come on. That was just what we did. I mean, that is who people are. People have to give back. People have to care. And I love this court so much. So I have been really, that's been one of my things. But also, much broader work around the community and public counsel and, all kinds of other things. But it gives you a sense of belonging. It gives you a sense of enrichment. You get to meet so many remarkable people, both people who are, you go to public counsel and you listen to the lawyers there at our meetings talking about the DACA case or any of these other cases we take on, and there are hundreds. And it takes your breath away, and it makes you really humble about where you are and who you are. And it enriches your life.
Andrea?
Yes, and I came to it late. I mean, I was much more insular as a child. I was a writer too, but really trying to express what I believed through artistic methods, whether it was performing as an actress or writing short stories and getting my name in the American Girl at age 13 for my little short story and that sort of thing. So I saw the world in a much more insular kind of way. But it really was joining the State Attorney General's office and working with the people that I worked with and beginning to work in the civil rights section and doing school desegregation cases in San Diego and in Kern County, in Bakersfield. The sense of purpose and the sense of meaning that I got from that just kind of shifted me from that very insular. I still wanted to communicate, but it was really different. And first of all, you had to read the paper every morning very carefully, because at coffee, if you didn't understand exactly what was in the paper with people like Bob O'Brien was one of them too, but Wale Tashima, as I said, and Sam Williams and Lauren Miller Jr. and people like that who were really civically minded and with sense of purpose. So that was where it started, and staying in and returning to the Attorney General's office or being in the United States Attorney's office. And one of the things we haven't talked about is sort of the women's movement, and it really was at my back during all of this. I mean, all of these different jobs I had, I was always the first, but it was a whole attitude that helped and kind of pushed those of us who started in the 60s forward. And so it was just a continuation. And so, when I was working with John Vandekamp in the DA's office in the early years, we had the first affirmative action program that they had ever had. And then later going to the United States Attorney's Office and opening the door to people who had never been in the office before, and being able to see the women and the people of color. And so it has enriched my life consistently, and I'm still volunteering and doing those various things. And in my law firm, I was able to be the pro bono partner too, and so be able to work with the public counsel and to do those things. But it just so enriched my life.
We have time for one more question. Well, this is maybe my favorite question. If you were going to write your memoirs, what is your favorite story about being a first? Gail, I know you have one.
So my favorite story is at the end of my clerkship, because I was the first female clerk that Judge Williams had ever hired. He and I got along so well. I loved this guy. He respected my mind. He respected my ability. He was encouraging. And yet, when we were saying goodbye, and he was giving me a present, at the end of the year, as judges typically do. And so he got me this sterling silver. It was engraved from him with all this gratitude and all that. And it was a dining room table crummer. Do you guys know what that is even anymore? So when you host a fancy party, you can have this silver sterling thing to wipe the crumbs off the table. Anyway, I loved him anyway. Oh my, yes. So I think that's one of my favorite stories.
That is a great story.
I
Andrea?
don't think I'm ready. Someone go for a second.
Yeah, I haven't given it a lot of thought, because I think most of the time I always feel like being the first at something is not really that great an achievement, especially if you're like the last of it. So I think I've always been so focused on how am I going to open the door for the next person. I think back, though, how clueless I was about how unusual I was. Like, I remember, like, at O'Melveny at the time, the messengers wore blue jackets, like, jackets with buttons. And I remember, like, how I had to, like, I had just a couple of outfits, of course, as you can imagine. And one of them was like a blue suit. And I couldn't wear the jacket around the office because people would start handing me paperwork. And a funny story, which I'll tell you, that Anita Hill always tells this story about me and her. And so Anita and I are law clerks together, and we were in the same office. And I swear, no one can tell us apart. No one. And as Anita says, we don't look any more alike now than we did then. And like it was hysterical. We used to we started calling ourselves Anita, because it was like we were like one person for the entire firm. So you go 8 weeks working somewhere as a summer clerk, and no one can tell you from the only other black woman in the entire law firm, which, as Anita has explained, is a microaggression. But I remember that about, like, the whole summer I was there, and sometimes I would walk in and the receptionist, and I would just like do like this, because I was like, you don't know who I am. And I remember that really well, and that's like not a good first story, because it's not about accomplishments or anything else, but I just remember that idea that just that whole 8-week period, and no one could tell us apart. And until she had like this run-in.
With a guy.
And now everyone's really clear about who she is.
A few very young people are whispering to each other. They
Who's
didn't know,
Anita
but
Hill?
Oh, who's Anita Hill? Yeah, well, after the first of these last couple of months, if you don't know who Anita Hill is, we're just going to keep
Yeah.
repeating ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, I will repeat Nina's first thought, which is exactly right, and it's the same one that each of us would have here, which is that being first is nowhere near as important as not being the only. And luckily, as the U.S. Attorney, I was followed by 4 terrific women, and there were some terrific men in between, but I will tell one story. And the first United States attorney, and actually in many ways here, and it was the third in history too, I should tell you, because in 1918 was the first United States attorney in the Northern District of California. And Annette Adams was the United States attorney before she had the right to vote in a national election in 1918. Then there was this slight gap until they could find a qualified woman when President Carter appointed 4 of us at about the same time in 1977. But my story is, as the first woman, I think being from the state court was almost as bad as being a woman. Many people, even though my hair was parted in the middle and came to about here, most people did not know that I was Hispanic and that my mother was born there. So I was protected a great deal from any of the traditional low expectations or discrimination that a person of color would have. But it was very noticeable that not only was I the first woman United States attorney, they had never seen as many women and people of color in the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was a remarkable change between 1977 to 1981. And sometimes the assistants got a little bit of the ire of this terrible change. I was usually quite protected, except in one instance, one of the assistants with whom the judge was quite upset said, "You tell little Miss Muffet." That was I. But it was the same judge that when I went and said goodbye and said, he said to me, you taught me something. I said, I did? He said, yeah. You said, you showed me that some of those women were, I thought, yes, were being contemptuous. And you taught me they were just being assertive. So we learned something.
Thank you all very much for sharing your stories. Robin, do you want to?
To wrap it up here. Well, I hope that, sorry, I just would like you all to join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I found this to be an incredibly moving, charming, and inspirational evening, and I walk away from this a different person than I walked in. So thank you again all for being here.
Thank